This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers Podcast, dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.
We are listening to phone calls from Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke from Behind Bars. Very revealing phone calls that very much demonstrate the extreme mental illness state that both of them are in. One almost, I don't want to say one's worse than the other. It's kind of depending on the issue at hand. We're going to take a listen now to a phone call with Ruby Franke. Talking about realizing that Jodi has pled guilty. And this is a point in, it seems, the incarceration where Ruby may have been starting to lift away from the teachings, if you will, of Jodi Hildebrandt. It's a very different Ruby than we heard in some of the other phone calls. This is about a 20-minute piece. Let's take a listen.
Did you see that Jodi pled guilty today?
I did see that. Yes. Is that a relief for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big relief. It's a big relief. There would have been positive the other way too. Had she not pled guilty, there's enough evidence that she could have been convicted for life. But that would have been messy. It would have been really messy, and the kids would have. So
do you and her get the same outcome no matter what now, or is there a chance that it would be different?
That's a really good question. That's one that I've asked Lamar. No, we can still have different outcomes. So Ellie asked a little bit about this. I wrote it out in a text to her. But so the next thing that will happen is I will fill out, and she will fill out probation and there's another P, paperwork. And basically you go through your history and you tell them your history, which there's no history on me. There's nothing, no criminal history, no mental health history, nothing.
No mental health history? Yeah, it's called undiagnosed mental health history.
I'm also hiring a professional to do a mental health evaluation, just to say she's good, like there's no mental health problem.
Oh, I didn't even have words for that one.
And then that will go to my probationary board. Jodi, she can lie on her paperwork, and she probably will. I don't think she's going to give them her history. But I think in the interview it's going to be apparent that she's mentally ill.
From one mentally ill person to another.
And so that will affect how long someone, because they're looking, how repentant are you? How much responsibility are you taking? How are you aware that what you've done is wrong? And she's not. She's the only reason she pled is because she didn't want to do life. She knew I would testify. The other thing is, on my plea deal, when I come up for probation, the prosecuting attorney can, will often, if they think that you're a danger to society, will talk to the probationary board or write them a letter saying, I think she needs to stay where she is. He's going to stay neutral and not write any letter when my probation comes up, which is a really big deal. But for her, he's not going to stay neutral. So we can come up to probation, and I can get off on probation, and she may not.
So what does probation look like? Like, what does that all entail?
It can look like several different things, I think. I'm still learning about this, and I think I never realized how complicated it is. I always thought you pled guilty and they tell you how long you're in.
Yeah, there's a lot of terminology to know.
Yeah, and half of the stuff that is said goes over my head, and then I have to go, I come back and I ask the girls here, I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean?
Yeah.
But probation could look like going home. Like, you could go home. Sometimes, it might look like going home with restrictions, like you can go home, but you need to live with somebody who's responsible and you can't be around certain people. Like, they may say you could go home if your parents agree to house you, but you can't go home to where your kids are living. It could look like something like that. Okay. Or it could look like something where I have an ankle monitor. Or it could look like you can go home if you pay a $10,000 fine. Or maybe it could look like instead of serving the rest of your time, we'll give you some good time and you can go home in half the time. Or so I think that getting off on probation, I think looks like there's several different ways that could happen.
Oh, I see. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And is that usually after you've already served some time then?
Say that one more time.
That's after you have served some time?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what that is going to be. I don't know if it's... One of the girls said that it would be for me 6 months, but I've also heard it could be 4 years, and some people serve several years before they ever see their probation board. So I'm really still, I could be in there 4 years, I could be in there 30. Like, I really don't know.
Yeah. And that will come in February?
On February 20th.
Okay.
Yeah. And the news that I saw today, Jodi's sentence hearing is also February 20th. So I'm going to make a request that we be transferred in 2 different vans. I don't think they're going to accommodate that.
Oh, do they? Okay, I see.
Yeah, when I went to the courthouse last week, what they do, they did this when they transported me to Utah County as well. They pull all the girls. There's only 2 housing here for girls. There's not very many girls here, but there's many for the men. And so they take the girls.
I want to point this out. This is interesting because on a previous phone call, she was talking about being a good girl and that she's not naughty, referring to the crimes. And that's in a previous video and audio podcast. It's interesting that she's referring to a women's prison as the girls, and then the men are the men. No, she's not like using the term boys over there. The girls. As if they're all children. It makes me think that there's something in Ruby's mind that operates on the level that she believes she's a girl, like a little girl, not a woman, not an adult that could face true consequences for their actions. Saying terms like I said, I'm not a naughty girl. and the girls. It's just an interesting note on this whole thing.
And they put them in a cell together, in a holding cell, to wait, and then they get all the men together, and they put all the men in the cells, and then they start putting on the ankle bracelets and the chains and the everything on the men while you're sitting in the cell with these women you're going to the court with for an hour. You're sitting with them, and then they pull the girls out and they line you up, and then they put the shackles on you, and then they take the men out to the men's van, and then they take the women out to the women's van, and then you drive to the courthouse together, and then they take you out.
How far away is your place from the courthouse there in St. George?
30 minutes, 40 minutes.
Okay.
And then you sit in a cell at the court. So if someone's hearing's at 9, this is what happened to me. There was a girl that went with me, and her hearing was at 9, but mine wasn't until 11. So she went in, and she had like a 5-minute hearing. And then we sat in the cell and talked for 2 hours until it was my turn. And then we rode back together. So you pretty much spend several hours together, whoever is going to the court that day with you.
Interesting. So that means on February 20th, it would be you and her going together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was the last time you talked to her? Was it that day?
It was when we were arrested.
Okay.
Yeah. I left early in the morning to go to a dentist appointment with Julie. We left at like 3 in the morning, and she called me sometime in the morning, and so I went back down. But when I got to the house, I mean, it looked like the movies. There was a red fire truck, there was a black van with tinted windows, there were 2 ambulances, there were 20 cop cars. I mean, it was.
Did you just sit in your car?
No, I pulled up and found a spot to park. She lives on a cul-de-sac. I parked in the cul-de-sac, and I walked up, and the driveway was just full of cops, and I just walked up to the cops, and they said, "Are you the mother?" And I nodded my head, and so they took me and put me in the casita, and I sat there for a couple hours. I just sat there, and then they were finishing looking through the house and stuff, I think, and some of the guys were coming in and out with pizza, and so I think Eve was still there because the ambulance car was there. I was eating pizza with the police, and then once the kids were taken in the ambulance cars, then the detective came and patted me down and arrested me, and then took me to the courthouse for questioning, which I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't say anything, because Lamar was really helpful. Like, if you ever get arrested, don't say anything. I just didn't say anything. And she was like,
how did you find Lamar? Was he just assigned to you coincidentally, or did you?
So she has an attorney that she's used for connections, and I called him and no one answered, but then she called him and he said, "I only do like business law, I don't do criminal law, but here's a number of 2 people who do that I would highly recommend." And so she gave the 2 numbers, and I got the number from Kevin. I don't know how the numbers got from. I don't know how, but Kevin said, "Here's your attorney, and this is her attorney," and that was the last time I talked to Kevin. It was a couple of days after my arrest, but so I didn't see Jodi at all when I went to the house to turn myself in. I didn't see her.
Okay.
and I went. They took me to the courthouse, and the detective was like, "I've got all night. We can talk all night." And I didn't say anything. I just said I want an attorney. So I could hear Kevin in the hallway talking, and then he left. And when they took me out of the room, they took me outside and cuffed me and said, again, they cuffed me again, and then they told me you're under arrest and then they told me two of the charges, and then they had me get in the patrol car, and that's when I saw Jodi. I saw Jodi was also in the patrol car, and she had surgery on her shoulder. She couldn't put her hands behind her back, so then they pulled her out and changed up the way they arrested her so she could drive with her hands in front of her. And then we had about a 45-minute drive to the jail. And that was the last time I spoke to her. We were in the back. And we didn't say a whole lot. I mean, we talked the whole time, but I don't remember really saying a whole lot. We hummed a couple hymns, and she
hummed a couple hymns. She
was still justifying the whole time. She's like, don't worry, we'll have our day in court. And then when we were booked in, they put us in separate cells, and we've been in separate cells ever since.
Notice how she plays it. Again, it's kind of revisionist history that she's doing of she was still justifying it. She was still justifying it. Well, you were justifying it too, Ruby. You continue to justify it in several phone calls after all of this took place. It wasn't like you suddenly had this moment of clarity upon being arrested. You continued to go down the road of poor, persecuted Ruby. Yeah.
So, do you hate talking about that kind of stuff? Does it trigger anything, or is it just?
No, I don't. I think it's fun. No, I don't mind talking about it. It's maybe good for me to talk about it. I don't know if you like talking about it.
I was just wondering if it triggered anything. But if you're doing okay mentally, and then that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I think putting the pieces together and just seeing, like, she knew she was lying the whole time. Like, and it's embarrassing too to like repeat. Oh my gosh, how gullible was I? Oh my gosh, how much power I gave this person, and I didn't see it. But when I realized, so she had, her attorney's name is Doug Terry, and mine's Lamar, and Lamar, you know, maybe a month into it, he's maybe not even that long, he's like, Jodi denies everything. She denies having anything to do with this. And I was shocked. I was like, what? And I'm still telling Lamar, like, you know, all of the justifications and all of the, you know, I'm talking like a criminal. I sound like a mad person. He was so patient with me.
Because you are.
So patient with me. He would just look at me and, like, kind of dumbfounded, like I'd said 2 + 2 is 7, and I really believed it. And he would.
You did. And you are a criminal. And you are a mad person. You're not talking like one. You are one.
Just stare at me. I'm like, what am I saying that's so off? And but that's because I really believed it. But then when I heard that Jodi was not talking like that, she was denying the whole thing, it told me she knew all along. It's like a little kid who doesn't know it's wrong to pee in their underwear. Like, they don't know. They're not embarrassed by it. It's like, oh, I was supposed to pee in the toilet? Oh, oops. But you get a 6-year-old.
But you're a fucking adult. So you're not a 6-year-old. And you knew what you were doing. You did. This whole act of, I was under her spell. I was under her. No, you just are incapable of taking accountability for your actions. That's all.
You get a 6-year-old who knows they're supposed to pee in the toilet and they're peeing down the heater vent. They're going to try to hide it. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized she knew all along. And she's hiding it.
So did you.
And then I was like, crap, what am I done? And that's when things kind of started turning. I was like, she's not been honest. I didn't know she wasn't honest. I didn't know she would lie. And it's like,
basically stating here that you too, Ruby, knew all along that this was wrong. If you're recognizing that Jodi over here is lying and she's denying it, that also means you know what's right and wrong. I don't know what's worse here. I mean, someone who's mentally ill that's doing these sort of things that truly believes it's okay, or someone who knew all along that this was wrong, which I think is both of them, really, but continues to go down the road because they claim they know better, that they're like a 6-year-old who would pee in a heater vent. Nice analogy, by the way, Ruby.
What else has she been lying about? Where else have I been deceived?
Oh, you've been deceived.
What was that?
Oh, no, I was just, agreeing.
Yeah.
You did see it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
And it was just
Didn't see
like
it. Nope.
the little string that started pulling apart the fabric. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, what? I can talk about it now. Yeah, go ahead.
Lamar was just very, very kind that day that we met with him. It was very time and just visit with us.
Oh, like miraculous.
Yeah. He and his wife.
Mhm. Yeah, he had a way of like he didn't beat around the bush. Like there were sometimes he would say things that were shocking to me. Like he would like repeat what I said, but he would say it in a different tone so I could hear myself. And he's like, "Is that really what you think?" And I'm like, "Oh." And he would, but then there were other times that
you have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Do you want to end the call, or do you want me to call you back? How do you want to?
We can end for today, and then we can always talk again. So
yeah,
I'm just really glad that he's there to kind of help you through it, and
yeah. Well, that first night I was in the jail, I just felt really strongly like I'm sending you help. Help is coming.
Yeah.
And I just felt like that was Lamar, and he's been very, very helpful. I'm grateful for him.
Well, that's what we've all been praying for this whole time. So I'm glad that even it's a different kind of help, but I'm glad it's finally here.
Me too. I'll take it. Like I hate this, but I'm taking it.
Of course. Yeah. It was good to talk to you.
You have exceeded the allowable time for this call. Goodbye.
Not exactly clear who that was on the other line. I don't know if it was a family member or a counselor of some sort. It was never really quite clear. But there you go. More of the delusions of Ruby Franke from behind bars. We have all of the Ruby Franke jailhouse calls for you, and Jodi Hildebrandt calls here on the podcast and the YouTube channel, True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. If you'd like to weave your way through them as we have been. It is certainly a fascinating listen for absolutely disgusting individuals and what they are capable of doing. I'm Tony Bruschi. Press subscribe and stay with us. Hey, it's Tony Bruschi. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free.
So you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.